Hello, listeners. Today we're talking to email marketing legend Adam Kitchen. Adam is a co-founder of Magnet Monster alongside Andrew Langhorn, with Wiehan Britz serving as the CEO. And for those that don't know but should know, Magnet Monster is a retention marketing agency known for helping e-com brands drive serious results with email and SMS. So without further ado, let's dive straight in. So starting off with early career and early life. What was early life like for you, Adam, and how did it shape the man you are today?
Well, if we're talking about specific to career, I actually didn't have any intention to get into e-commerce. It just happened by chance. I used to be a bodybuilder, although not now, as you can see. And my first job was selling supplements at a retail store in the city centre. And that was something that I was really into. But in parallel to that, I always wanted to be a kindergarten teacher. Actually, that was my dream career. I love kids. I always wanted to work with kids. And that was something that I was pursuing. So this was like a side hustle, if you will. And just another interest that I had was training, going on internet forums, reading information, learning about nutrition, supplementation, and then leaning into selling products as my first job. And I got an invitation from the owner of that company. They had 5 brick and mortar stores to go to the head offices, which were in Warrington at the time. And back then, everything was custom coded from the ground up. So they were selling online. It was all heavily led through SEO. And that was my introduction to e-commerce at 17, 18 years old. And he was like a father figure to me at the time. My father had just passed away, and I was feeling really lost in life. And he, the owner of the company, took me under his wing, and I was sat in a small office like this every day. He was behind me. I was here. I was doing customer service, email marketing, obviously, a lot of social media stuff back when it was nascent, when just at the beginning of Facebook. And he was a great man, and he gave me a lot of wisdom, huge amounts of time. And I think he looked at me like a prodigy, like an adopted son as well. And he was a fantastic man. And he taught me a huge amount, not just about business, but life in general. And I remember one day going into work when I was 21, and I was just browsing online. And I wanted to get back to working with kids, even though I was enjoying the digital marketing. It wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to work with kids. I wanted to make an impact with children. And I started to apply randomly for teaching jobs abroad. Kindergarten is my specialty age. And I was applying to a role in Hong Kong. And I had no idea where Hong Kong was or anything about it. I just applied randomly. And then things progressed very, very quickly. I remember I was invited for an interview by the lady who owned the kindergarten there. It was an international school in Hong Kong. And I knew after I progressed through the written interviews and did the video interview, which was on a Sunday, that they were going to offer me the job. And the following Friday, I remember sat at my computer and work, and I got an email through saying that they wanted me to move to Hong Kong in 4 weeks. And that completely changed my life trajectory. And it was also a huge crossroads for me, because I was in the process of helping my boss rebuild and migrate the website across from a very archaic custom coded solution across to like a modern CMS and e-commerce platform. And I was leading that project, and I felt guilty, Joe. I felt like I was letting him down because I wanted to take this job. And as I said, this man was like a father figure to me. And I remember messaging him on the Saturday after I received that offer. And obviously this guy has 4 kids himself, and he's obviously a very busy man in business, and he has his own family. And I said to him, can we meet to speak? I just couldn't wait until the Monday. And he said he would come to meet me in Liverpool city centre within the hour. And I remember going to meet him, and I couldn't get my words out. I was choking up, like trying to tell him I'd been offered this job. feeling emotional just revisiting this story now. And I thought he was going to be disappointed or upset or frustrated. And he knew obviously what I was passionate about and what I cared about. And I told him, Mike, I've been offered this job in Hong Kong. And I never forget his initial reaction. He was elated for me. He just said, well, that's fantastic. You have to go. That's an amazing once in a lifetime opportunity. And I remember being taken aback, feeling confused, thinking that he was going to flip and be disappointed and angry. And I said, well, what about the website, the company, and the project? I feel as though I've led you astray because a lot of that was my direction and my suggestions. And he said, Adam, the company existed before you. The company will exist after you. You've got to do what's best for your life. And this is 100% it. And that was a very big lesson because I realized that really great people will never try to bring you down. They will always look out for your own interests, even when sometimes it's at the expense of what's good for them in the short term. And I've tried to apply that philosophy throughout my own life as much as possible. So anyway, fast forward 4 years or so, I've done my stint teaching. I loved Hong Kong. It completely changed my life. I've got amazing friends now all over the world. And when I was there, I loved the job. I loved everything about it, but I've started to become disillusioned with all the bureaucracy involved in modern day teaching and how much paperwork is involved. I'm a bit more of a laissez-faire, free reign guy when it comes to working with kids and unleashing creativity. And I was always continuing to do marketing on the side, doing my direct response copywriting. I was still doing some freelance work for the company, which was called Body Active. And eventually I moved back home around 2014. And I had to restart my life. Something happened at the time, which I won't go into. It's another story. And it just was a segue back into the world of marketing. I started to really pick things up. I've done everything. I've done ads management. I've done social media. I've done email. I've owned my own stores. I've done direct response copy. I feel like I've well and truly been around the block. And I started to make more money doing that than I was teaching. And I wanted to travel the world. I wanted to experience new things. Hong Kong gave me a great taste of everything else that's out there in the world. And I realized back 10, 11 years ago that marketing or working on a laptop was an opportunity to do that and live this digital nomad lifestyle, which is now, every man and his dog is doing this. And that's been like a 10-year journey now. So obviously I don't do that traveling the world anymore because I've got my son. But that opened my eyes up to, and I was very fortunate just to catch on to, an industry that was taking off like a rocket ship. And around 7 years ago, when the market started to consolidate around Klaviyo and Shopify, I realized that. And I told Andy at the time that there was a big, massive opportunity. I was working for Andy as like a freelancer for one of his companies. And I said, look, do you want to set up this company around email marketing for Klaviyo, Shopify? And we did. We were very fortunate enough to get in at the right time, rode the coattails of their success. And over the last 6.5, 7 years, we've worked with probably close to 300 brands now. Some of the biggest D2C companies in the world, which has been incredible and never would have thought that. And we've been managing everything from email, SMS, direct mail, full suite retention marketing. And we've had the company up to 30 plus employees. We've actually just, as you've just seen, contracted down back to 8 because of all the technological changes. But, these are things we can probably get into at some point over the next hour. So that's a high level overview of the last 17 years of my life and career.
Wow. A lot to unpack there. The first thing is that your mentor seemed like a true mentor. He was in it to kind of see you grow. And that, yeah, and that showed when you had that conversation with him, which is cool. And obviously, we talked about how Magnet Monster came around with Andrew and the relationship there. Let's move on to Magnet Monster email. We've touched on what Magnet Monster does, but if we could just go in a little bit more detail. So, what do you guys do? So, what is retention marketing, email, SMS? There's a lot of stuff there. Who do you best serve, and then what makes you different?
So, in a nutshell, what we do is there's two sides to, well, any business, but if we're talking specifically e-commerce or direct consumer businesses, you have your acquisition, which is getting new customers, typically from paid channels these days, like Meta, Google, TikTok, or also organic channels like SEO, even though they're not really organic. But then you have the retention side, which is once you've collected that data, how do you leverage it to increase profitability and drive repeat sales? And that generally encompasses channels like email marketing, which is very highly profitable, SMS or text message, WhatsApp, and direct mail as well. So just as though you would have a team controlling acquiring customers, we go into e-commerce brands, we control retaining them, or we're responsible for driving the KPIs around repeat purchases.
That's really interesting. Do you have a thing where you know the goodwill meter? If you've got low goodwill, you need to focus on giving value, and then you've got a load of value, you can focus on conversion. Do you go through these cycles in email where it's like, okay, we need to just, our emails need to be more value focused and less conversion focused? Is this something you have to kind of wrestle with?
That is a very, very good question, actually, and it's something that, yes, I've wrestled with a lot. I used to have a very strong view on this, and I heavily lean towards the value-based philosophy, if you will. But when you think about it, what is value? It's all perception in the minds of the consumer. If I sign up to, what's this brand, Polly, or this women's clothing brand, and I see my sisters. Well, first of all, I wouldn't be wearing women's clothes, but that's not the way to talk about. But I just see the behavior of different people relevant to different brands. So my sisters, I watch them consume content on their mobile. It's heavily sales-led promotional behavior. When they receive communications around this, they click, they're interested, they engage with the emails or any type of communication. Whereas if you are like a health and wellness guy, like I bought this Whoop band about a month or so ago, I'm very interested in the content that they send to me on how to improve my health markers. And there's not really a need to cross-sell, upsell me, because my main focus is extracting maximum amount of value from the purchase. So it's all contextual and specific to the brand and also the consumer as well. I think if you're in fast fashion, then you're going to be heavily sales and promo-led. Because there's only so many tutorials you can send someone about how to wear an outfit or how to do their makeup. It's quite a novelty thing where people are buying and they're on to the next brand. So you have to sort of stay top of mind with that type of content. Whereas if you are something with a lower purchase latency like this, or you're in health tech, or you sell furniture maybe, then your strategy needs to adjust accordingly. And that might mean lowering the frequency of touch points or changing the actual content of the emails to be more content focused as opposed to sales and promo led.
Interesting. And so obviously D2C e-com is the main focus, and I don't want to take the conversation too much into SaaS, but does retention marketing, what you do, have a benefit on the more kind of the B2B side of things, or is D2C more kind of where you can really bring the most value?
Well, I think actually SaaS companies are much more seasoned and knowledgeable about retention compared to D2C, which is heavily acquisition led. Now, obviously, you can't have one without the other, or you can't have retention without acquisition, I should say. And that still applies to the same way in SaaS. But I think SaaS companies have traditionally prioritized it a lot more because it's the key to scaling. A lot of them are making them sustainable businesses, whereas in e-com, a good or standard repurchase rate for a brand might be between 30 to 40%. Now, if you have a SaaS product where you're losing 60% of customers within a month, well, you can't build that business. It's impossible. So retention is much more of a critical part of growing and scaling a SaaS company, whereas in D2C, it's heavily led by first purchase and new customer acquisition. So yes, SaaS can definitely benefit from it. You could argue that I wouldn't say one is more important than the other, but it's much more cornerstone to their business. But the truth about retention, as you'll probably know, Joe, is that it's baked into the product experience. So no matter how great your emails are or texts or direct mails, it doesn't really matter. If someone has a terrible experience with the product or they sign up for a software and it doesn't deliver results, then they're not going to make another purchase. So it only works when what you're actually offering is worth selling and provides value to the customer.
Yeah, if your Whoop band's not giving you any value, then you're not going to be paying attention to those emails
Exactly.
or things like that. That's interesting. So next question. I'm obviously the newsletter you put in yesterday about the changes at Magnum Monster. I'm going to put the link in the description, and I guess it ties into this question. But where's Magnum Monster headed over the next 2, 5, 10 years, and how does this align with where retention marketing is going?
Well, just to call out the obvious one, and this won't be any surprise to anyone, but I think it's very hard to say where we're going in the next 5 to 10 years. In fact, I would struggle to guess where we might be in the next year with the way technology is advancing at the moment. And obviously, our business model is under threat. And I think anyone who doesn't acknowledge that across the industry is very naive or is just burying their head in the sand as to what's going on. Agency owners tend to be a bit ahead of the curve compared to brands in deploying the new advancements in technology, in my experience, because obviously we've got channel-specific specialism, but that gap closes over time. So eventually, when you sign up for a software like Klaviyo or Shopify, a lot of the orchestration of the customer journey will just be done out of the box. It won't necessarily require a specialist or an agency like ourselves. Now, that's not to say that we won't have any role, but I think the addressable market will shrink and it will require fewer people to serve that segment. So ultimately, I think what that means specifically for us is that if we keep trying to scale based on volume of clients and head count to deliver those services, well, that's a business built on very brittle foundations and not fit for purpose in the next few years where we're heading. So what we've tried to do is prepare for these changes as quickly as possible, get really lean, just keep the best possible people on the team, and then be as agile as possible in adopting the new tech. And the way we were structured before was quite archaic and it was going to become obsolete. There was no doubt about that. So this is just us trying to get as prepared as possible and taking a calculated risk about what's going to happen in the industry. So we're going to stay lean, heavily lean into AI. And obviously, if you're any type of service-based business, just focus on providing an amazing quality service to clients.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's funny because you talked in the beginning about being around the block, and for us, I'm seeing firsthand now that we've got to push the boundary, get to the boundary, and then we deliver, and build the processes, and then we give to clients, and then we skill them up, empower them. They get to the same level, and then it's push, and it's like we're in that push phase now of just drastic change. But you've obviously done this quite a few times. This isn't your first time. This is like the cycle of business, but. And one of the things in the newsletter that you talked about was how actually your team, so you, Andrew, and Wiehan would take a lot of the hits yourself because you cared a lot about your people. But obviously the market conditions are forcing you to change behavior now and adapt. So that's interesting. So on to the next question. What is it like working with Andrew and Wiehan as kind of individuals, as in the business, and what's your role in the team?
So Andy and Wiehan are amazing. I couldn't do this without them personally. I'm not the type of solo founder, I don't think, that would be happy or content to go it alone. Many reasons for that. One, especially as I've got older, I realize I just value or starting to value a lot more my free time away from work, and also have multi-dimensional objectives that are not just specific to making as much money as possible. So that's very important to me, that I prioritize my health and relationships, specifically with my son, but also with my friends and family as well. And that means when you want to have that type of balance and you're running a company, you do need business partners, in my opinion, unless you are very fortunate enough to be an excellent systems operational person, which I'm not. So Andy is the polar opposite to me. I'm quite extroverted and social and like doing marketing and sales. And I vividly remember when we started the company, Andy said, never bring me onto a sales call, just keep me in the back engine room and I'll be happy. And that's how it's worked out. And a lot of people, I think, mistakenly think when you go into business that you should find someone with the same personality traits and skills as you, but actually you want the opposite. So me and Andy we obviously have lots of similarities and shared values as people and objectives. But in terms of skill sets, now Andy's not like a marketing and sales guy in his core, I think he'll admit, and he doesn't enjoy going out doing the social interaction stuff. I do enjoy things like that. But what I don't enjoy is getting deep into the weeds a lot of the time on troubleshooting, engineering, technical thing, even the financial parts of the business. He's very, very strong with all these things, as well as operations as well. Now, it's not that I can't do them, but I just don't gravitate towards them naturally. And it's the same for him, with what I do. He can do them. Well, I think when you have an A player, they figure out a way to do anything. And Andy is, he's an incredibly talented and smart person. So he can do them, but I think you should just lean into your strengths, and my strengths are mine and his are his. And we have a great relationship because we understand that. Wiehan came in at a later stage by a random LinkedIn message that he sent to me. And Wiehan was brought on initially to be like an operations manager. And then when I stepped out and had my son, I took quite a lot of time off work in the last 18 months. And Wiehan took over in the CEO role. Now, I think for a company like ours, given how much say me, Andy, and Wiehan already have, and the relationship we have with each other, we don't really need a CEO because we're all aligned on where we're going and the direction we're heading. So I think all the decisions we make are in collaboration with each other. It's not like one person overrides the other, even though we do disagree and have strong disagreements frequently. We always seem to have that mutual respect where we come to a unanimous consensus. So Wiehan, one of the interesting things is when he stepped into the CEO role is he realized he didn't enjoy the marketing and sales as much as I do. And actually what Wiehan really likes is the client work and the operational side. He enjoys getting his hands dirty, strategy, communicating with clients. I think that gives him a lot of energy. So I think that's how all three of us operate at the moment. It's me on marketing and sales. It's Andy, finance, blends of operations, any day-to-day admin planning for the business. And then Wiehan is now back in client work and orchestration of operations. And we all seem very happy with that.
And that's so interesting. And then in terms of like the vision, you're sharing the vision. It's not one of you's leading that. It is a shared thing between you.
In the past, it's been, and not to say this in an egocentric way, but I think it's been set by me. And then, Andy especially, I think, has tended to follow my judgment on that. Obviously with having his own strong input as well, but I think he's trusted my judgments quite a lot. Likewise, Wiehan, but I think the latest changes were probably led primarily by Wiehan in terms of initiating the direction he thinks we should head in. And when he initiated this and started to delve into it, I mean, me and Andy were rapidly in agreement with him. So, Wiehan is definitely like spearheading this new direction that we're heading in, and me and Andy are following him, and we agree with him. So it's all mutual.
Yeah, it's interesting what you're saying about you can jump onto the more technical engineering stuff, but in that works in the short term. Like if you've got a bottleneck and Andrew's like, we need you, Adam, right now. But long term, you have to be energized. I keep thinking, I was speaking to like a few people, and the people that say a designer who lives and breathes design will beat the person who's doing a bit of design for the business, doing a bit of this because they're 100% in there. So, but I like that. But it is, you can hop onto that thing, but ultimately we have to do what energizes us because the game is to play long term. That's the game, right? So it's interesting.
Exactly.
So let's move back to the email side. So when it comes to email marketing, what are your non-negotiables that you need to get right for kind of clients? Then what comes next? And then what are the things that we probably worry too much about?
So non-negotiables, I think there is really only two. Number one, you need a strong sending infrastructure. So your email authentication and dedicated sending domain, because if your messages don't reach the recipients, then your strategy counts for nothing. So that's like the cement or foundation upon which your whole strategy is built upon. And it's very easy to set that up correctly. And then secondly, you need clean data going into the system. So this includes new customers coming to the website, making sure that you're segmenting correctly and you're cleaning the database and it's hygienic. Because again, if you start to send to spam traps, people who are not engaged, people who have no interest, then you're going to damage your ability to reach people who do want to receive your messages. So that's the cornerstone of the non-negotiables. And the next one, sorry, you asked me was...
What comes next after non-negotiables?
What comes next? So email is very, very simple, Joe, honestly. Like people overcomplicate it, but what you need is a good automation setup, or flows as they've been called now since Klaviyo's became popularized. And these are basic triggered events based on when someone lands on the website, like abandoned cart, welcome flow, post-purchase series. This is your core infrastructure that should automate a significant amount of revenue on a yearly basis or a monthly basis. And that tends to be like a one-off project to set them up. Now, obviously, people do go back and modernize them and add to them and tweak them, and I would suggest doing that. But most of the time, it's a case of renewing them on a yearly or 2-yearly basis for most brands. And then once you have a good sending infrastructure, you've got your automation set up, then you're going to want to send a frequent communication cadence of campaigns. So these are promotional touch points like Black Friday, Valentine's Day, new product launches, content, education, tutorials, etc. Anything really that you think is worth sharing with your database. And what do people worry about too much? It's a good question. I think people worry too much about over communicating, and I've been advocating for this in the past as well. So I'm guilty of, I think, leading people slightly astray. At the end of the day, the way our attention spans are these days, I think people just don't care and will just ignore you if they see your email in the inbox and they don't want to read it. So yes, there is a limit. I'm not suggesting you should email someone 5 times a day because you're obviously just going to churn and damage your deliverability. But I think we can send a lot more, and we shouldn't worry about what people think too much, especially if you are leading with useful content that is perceived as value. So I think under communicating is something that I see continuously, and brands scared to email the customers, which is very weird because they're happy to follow them around all the internet, cookie the browser and plaster ads in front of their face all the time, make dozens of stories per day, post on social media incessantly, but they won't send them one email every 2 days, or they're scared to send them 2 a week. So I think that is very misplaced fear.
Interesting. Really, really interesting. You mentioned something and it triggered the idea of things being seasonal. Because I imagine your Black Band, right? Christmas, Black Friday.
Yep.
maybe. But like obviously throughout the year, Whoop's going to be pretty consistent, whereas other brands might be actually really dead and then spike, and then others might be consistent. Do you have to just figure out is there a pattern in D2C, or is it brand dependent, and you've just got to work out which brand needs what cadence through the year?
There's definitely a few things that influence how frequently you should communicate with someone. Going back to, I think, one of the beginning things we talked about, if you sell mattresses, for example, then you don't need to really send someone an email every single day of the week, because once you buy the fucking mattress, you don't need to buy 10 more. So it doesn't matter how many emails that you send to people, they're not going to buy another mattress again. The logical thing would be to show them how to get a great night's sleep, or leverage referrals, make sure that they have a good experience with the product. Whereas if you're selling supplements or protein bars, then it's a very highly consumed product. So the chances of driving repeat sales are much higher. So that would warrant a higher cadence of communication. Now, obviously, there is things that you pointed out, like seasonality. So around Black Friday, Christmas, Mother's Day, maybe for certain brands, you would want to increase the frequency because buyers are actively in the market looking for what you offer. But it's very contextual depending on what the brand is selling. If you have a high purchase frequency item, then yes, you're going to want to communicate with a more frequent cadence. If you sell something that is typically one and done, there's going to be much less leverage and revenue that you're able to drive through email.
Interesting. Thank you. Next question. What's the biggest myth or misconception about email marketing you see today?
I just made a post on this on LinkedIn. Actually, there's many stupid myths that are leading people to pursue the wrong strategy. But one of them that really does get under my skin is optimizing for revenue per recipient, or revenue per mile, revenue per 1,000 sends in a vacuum. And this is a problem because it's branded an efficiency metric, but brands don't care about that. What they care about is the total amount of revenue and profit that they're able to drive. So if you email a cohort of 100 VIP customers and you have 100,000 customers on your list, and you only send a special offer to these 100 VIP customers, of course you're going to drive like really great efficiency, but you just ignored 999,900 customers. Sorry, did I say a million or 100,000? 99,000. Yeah, so
yeah, mate, you got me lost on the maths as well, don't worry.
You get the point, yeah. So I think there is this belief that you should only email people who are super highly engaged, but actually, as you mature, you need to cast a wider net to try and bring people back in, and that's how you scale an email program. So getting away from those efficiency metrics, well, they're called efficiency, but it's actually not, and trying to group people and win people back who are in a wider segment and audience, as opposed to just cleansing them off the database because they haven't purchased or engaged with an email within 60 days. That's something that harms a lot of brands.
Do you think that like your authority on LinkedIn helps push back a lot? Like you can have five people saying this stuff, but if you know the brand that you've built on LinkedIn, people are going to listen to you over, say, 5 people saying this sort of stuff?
Maybe.
There's probably not too much of an answer to that. I just think, it's probably frustrating for you, but
people have their beliefs, and I think it's the sign of intelligence that you're able to assimilate new information and use deductive reasoning to change your view on something. That's very, very hard to do because we all have that innate cognitive bias towards what we already believe in. And this is obviously made worse by algorithms on social media constantly reinforcing that bias on what we believe in. So I think it's the hallmark of intelligence to see something that might be or appear contrarian to what you believe in, but be able to analyze the subject matter objectively to form a new opinion. But that's a deep conversation for another day, which I could spend a lot of time talking about as well.
Yeah, but I guess from your perspective, if someone hasn't got that deductive reasoning to keep up, they're not the perfect fit for you as well. So
Correct.
you're looking to attract the people that can evolve with you, and so that's great. So next question: looking back at how you built Magnet Monster, what would you do differently if you were starting the agency today?
A lot of things. I think we could have, in hindsight, grown the company a lot more aggressively at its peak. I think I held us back by being quite arrogant and thinking that we would only work with a specific market segment. I was pretty uneducated in my approach now when I look back. We used to turn down brands who were not doing 8 figures in revenue, which is very silly because there's just not a huge amount of brands in e-commerce that are doing over 10 million in annual revenue. So I really capped our ability to grow and structured the team in a way that was not set up to service those brands under that price point. But that's where the big addressable market was for us in our space. So we lost a lot of deals back then. And also what we found was that it was very hard to find really good people to serve the more sophisticated brands like 8 figures and above. So that led to service delivery issues and misalignment of expectations. So if I went back in time, I would try to service that smaller market segment at a more competitive price point and try and scale more aggressively and put less emphasis on trying to go up market. However, I think, not to be paradoxical to that, but it's switched now because I see that those smaller brands don't have the same need or won't have the same need, in my opinion, in the future, because a lot of what they're currently given by email agencies will be delivered out of the box by the software. And the people who will still need bespoke work will be the bigger brands. So I think I was ahead of the curve at the wrong time.
Yeah, interesting. Everything's time dependent, but yeah, I guess this is just made you a stronger entrepreneur now. So it's all good. Brilliant. So moving on to just a question on entrepreneurship then. What advice would you give to any new entrepreneurs trying to build something meaningful today?
Speak to your customers every single day. Really understand what their pain points are and then align everything towards attracting more of them, servicing them with the maximum amount of value, and then positioning yourself to speak to those pain points directly from a marketing and sales perspective. I think it's that simple, really. Don't speculate. Don't create too many hypotheses. Just speak to people who you believe you can serve and just become a true master at your craft or whatever that is. Just produce a great product that taps into that pain point and you will have a business. Simple as that.
What you said there is, I remember I was at a crossroads and I was like, what, algorithm hacks and all this. And I remember speaking to you, were like, just become an expert. And when you just have that North Star of expertise, you can kind of forget about a lot of the stuff because that will all change. And yeah, that's one of the things that shines with your content, I feel, just being an expert at what you do. And that comes through what you say and experience. And yeah, so that's great, mate. And what advice would you give to your younger 20-year-old self if you could?
Wow. There's a lot of things. I don't think I would necessarily change anything about my life. I would just drop things that weren't working much sooner. I think that's the only mistake maybe I've made. When things weren't working, just to cut my losses much more quickly.
How do you know the time? Is it 30 days, 60 days, 90 days?
Depending on what it is, you've got to iterate on things and give them a chance to improve. But when you know in your gut, pay attention to the gut because it just never lies. Just listen to what your gut is telling you. The gut tends to assimilate what the head has already like processed, and then it's telling you what direction you should move in. So I think when you're ignoring your gut, you're going to live in that constant anxiety and tension, and that's just going to destroy your productivity. So that would be my advice, is just anytime you feel something in your gut, act upon it, because it won't lead you astray. It's already processed things logically, and then it's just that innate feeling of telling you what you should do, but you're deferring.
Yeah, I've felt that. I've held on to things for far too long because I've had the Goggins going, you need to not give up, grind, grind, grind. And actually, yeah, listen to the gut and just drop things quicker. You're absolutely right there. Brilliant. So moving on to a bit of family and philosophy, how did having your son Max change your mindset towards business and life?
A lot. Max has been the best thing that has ever happened to me. And I'm sure if you speak to anyone with kids, they would say exactly the same thing. I think having children for me has made me much more intentional with my time and selective of whom I spend it with. And I don't mean that in an arrogant or conceited way. I mean it that it just really puts into perspective how limited time you have and how much they require, especially when they're at the age that he's been at. So that's been the main thing, is that it makes you very intentional. And actually, I think if you channel the energy in the right way, it unlocks a lot of leverage, because I realized a lot of the stupid shit I was doing before was just not effective or moving the needle. Whereas now when I sit down at the computer, I have a very specific amount of time where I need to get things done, because I know I've got to look after them, and I'm not willing to compromise that time. My son is more important than sending emails for e-commerce brands. But also you can get, I think it's important not to get too philosophical and sloppy, but you need to be a role model to your children. You can't just pedestalize them and make them first in everything in life. Actually, the best way to give them a great life and teach them how to be happy and content is to be the best version of you. And I've definitely been guilty of, don't want to call it over prioritizing him because he's my son and I'm happy with all the moments I've spent with him. But there has to be balance as well. I think that you can't abandon your child, but you can't abandon your work either. So that balance is very, very difficult to do. But having strict boundaries in place, and that will actually increase your productivity and make you realize a lot of the things that you were doing before are just not effective at moving the needle. And in my case, I'm very, very lucky. I've got great business partners. If I didn't have them, I could only imagine how much worse of a father I would be right now, honestly. So I'm super blessed to have Andy and Wiehan by my side.
Yeah, and it sounds like being intentional and working hard in business has dual purpose. It's the business side, but it's showing Max like this is the sort of man I am, and it's just that role model. So it works. It's not necessarily always conflicting, right?
Correct. It's complementary. It is complementary. And I actually went, as I think I've just said, a little bit too far into the whole fathering, dedicating time to my son. I know it seems ridiculous to say such a thing, but they need to learn how to be by themselves, right? Like, it's not good for children to constantly have adoration and attention and stimulation from adults pedestalizing them. Like, they need to learn how to be on their own, how to have space, how to be independent. And look, I've been guilty of probably investing too much focus into keeping them entertained 24/7, but I wouldn't take any of that back. It's been a good learning experience.
And I know that kindergarten was kind of the age you wanted to work at, and did work at in Hong Kong. So I guess like you wanted to enjoy as much of this time as possible as well. So what principles or philosophies guide how you live and work on just a daily basis? Being intentional being one, you've just said.
So I have a very simple outlook on life. I believe all your happiness and contentment is derived from 3 pillars. Your health, number 1. Your and I wouldn't put these in any specific order, the second ones, but it's your family and relationships and friends included in that, and then it's your work or your passion, whatever you want to do. Like that's what you spend most of your life optimizing around. It's not materialistic goods. If you ask anyone who's dying or on the deathbed, all the wisdom that's passed around is around those three things are what drives, whether you live a good life or not. So I just try and optimize around those three every single day. And I do quarterly check-ins with myself as well and try and treat it a bit like a business. So if I'm working too much, for example, I will know I need to rein back and put one of the other two in balance. And it's that simple. I go to the gym every single day, or I try to when I haven't got Max. I work every single day. I have a checklist of 3 items I need to do with work to make it a productive day. Very, very simple, just small increments I'm trying to improve every single day. And then I spend time with my family on a daily basis and try and keep in contact and be a good friend as well, because I'm very, very lucky. I've got incredible friends all over the world. And that's it. If you do those 3 things, you'll be happy, in my experience. And I think if you speak to someone who's unhappy, it's one of those elements, being out of sync, that makes them unhappy. And it's never because they're not driving a Ferrari, or they've got like 6 billion in the bank, or they're not going to holiday and like wearing these fancy clothes. It's because they're either not spending enough time with their family or friends, they are not healthy, or they're not pursuing something that's meaningful. So just optimize around those 3, and I think you'll live a good quality life.
Yeah, I love that. And you have quarterly check-ins just to make sure, because you can't be full tilt on all of them all the time. Like
Right.
sometimes one goes down. So yeah. And one of the things you said to me once, which was massive, which is just 1%. If you just get 1% better every single day, then, so it's the secret. But obviously we've got 5 minutes left and want to finish on time for you. So where can people learn more about Magnet Monster, and where can people follow you?
Magnetmonster.com. And if you want to follow me, just search me on LinkedIn, Adam Kitchen. I'm posting near enough every single day. Same on X or Twitter as well. So yeah, please feel free to follow there.
And yeah, finally, Adam, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. You're someone I've looked up to both as an entrepreneur and as a human being. We're getting a bit soppy now, I'm sorry. But genuinely excited to see where you and the team at Magnet Monster go in the next months and years to come. So thank you very much for coming on today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for the kind words. It means a lot to me.